Education with Parents as Teachers program. And that was the beginning of a long, amazing career. And so I've supervised Parents as Teachers, early Head Start programs. I have a PhD in child development, and about 6 years ago, I founded a nonprofit called Wonder Bloom. And I think they got the Zoom working.
Well, the Zoom is
Maybe.
working, it's just not connecting to the room.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to, I don't know, I'll have to do something.
Okay. So I founded the nonprofit Wonder Bloom. Our vision is that learning in nature nourishes the child's mind, body, and soul. And working in early childhood education for a long time, those of us like you that are trained well, and we know that children need to be playing, their learning needs to be hands-on. Started reading all this research about how beneficial it is for children to be spending time outdoors and learning with nature. This is a concept that they've been doing in European countries for a long time with forest kindergartens, but hadn't really seen it around around these parts in Utah. And also learning about the other troubling trends with children spending so much time on electronic devices and not really even engaging with the greater world outside of those devices. The latest
take the Audi.
that children in the US are spending only 1 hour a week outside and 40 hours a week on screens. So in starting Wonder Bloom, I wanted to try to bring to this community children really having a play-based, nature-based preschool experience. And so we do run a preschool in Murray called Wonder Bloom Nature Play School. And then we also do teacher trainings and some advocacy and research work around early childhood and nature. And so this is my team, although this isn't the most updated photo, out at our playground. And then I also have a husband and 2 kids that keep me pretty busy. And that's my cute little family picture there. So as we get started, I want you to think about one of your best childhood play memories. I'll give you one of mine. When I was in 5th grade, about 10 years old, I had a single mom who was trying to get her college degree. And so instead of sending me home to be alone at our apartment, she would send me on the school bus to go to my friend's house. And my friend was lucky enough to kind of live up on a mountainside and with a very wooded yard. And with a few neighbor friends, we started building a tree house. And so we got, I don't even remember how we sourced it. Maybe the parents were kind of giving us the supplies, but I just remember we had wood and nails and hammers, and we like hammered 2x4s into the tree trunk to get a nice little ladder. We made a platform, and we spent so much time after school up there in our tree house. It really felt like freedom to us. And those times, they're really etched into a really emotional part of who I am, because I can recall that and suddenly I have a flood of emotions that come with it too. It's not just what we did, but it's how we felt when we were doing it. And I included this picture here, which is my kids from a few years ago with their friend climbing in this giant tree. We probably spent 2 hours that day just climbing up and down and around and playing in this tree. And so now that you've had a minute, hopefully you've thought of a good, your favorite childhood play memory. Write it down on a Post-it note. And then once it's written down, I want you to share it with the person next to you. Okay, it sounds like most of you have had time to share. And so the question I want to ask before we launch into risky play, what is it? What do we need to think about? Is I want a couple of volunteers to tell me what made that childhood memory so exciting, because as I listened to your voices, there was a lot of joy and excitement and enthusiasm as you retold these stories. So tell me what made it exciting.
That was being away from the adults. We had our
Mhm.
own, our thing, and not there. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. She's saying we had a clubhouse. It was our own. We were away from the adults, and that made it feel really exciting and special. So that piece of independence that came with that. Anybody else want to share why it's so exciting? Yes.
I think some of it's the mastery. We
Okay.
a lot of building things and
Mhm.
making things that made you feel like accomplish something.
Mm-hmm. So he shared that mastering something, accomplishing something, building, that felt really exciting to him. Thank you for sharing those. We're talking about risky play today. And this researcher, Brusoni, defined risky play as thrilling and exciting play that can include physical injury. Now, later on, we'll talk about how to minimize the risks of physical injury, but that's part of what makes it kind of thrilling and exciting, is this the risk that comes with that too. Another researcher whose last name is Sandsetter came up with these 6 elements that go into risky play, or that define risky play. And so these are height, speed, dangerous elements like water and fire, dangerous tools, rough and tumble play, or disappearing and getting lost. Now, I have hung these 6 elements on the wall in these. I printed off papers for each of these. There's 3 on this side and 3 on this side. So I want you to take your Post-it note now and place it, if it fits, in one of these categories. If it's going to fit under more than one, you can repeat your little memory on more than one sticky note and stick it in more than one place. So take a minute to go hang up your memories under these risky play elements. So it looks like, without even knowing it, many of you have really favorite childhood memories that involved elements of risk. And isn't it quite extraordinary that that has stuck with you all this time as one of your favorite things? And so we have a few items under dangerous elements, 3 items under speed. We have about 7 things under disappearing and getting lost, and then we have a few under height. What's interesting is we don't have rough and tumble play or dangerous tools, but I bet with those, by just telling you those elements, that you probably have some memories that might pop into your mind, like, oh, I remember when. And so we're going to have an opportunity to maybe share some of these stories with the whole group in a little bit. I know I didn't plan this to like be meant for Zoom, but I'm trying my best to make it meaningful for the people that are joining us on Zoom too. So we've talked about what is risky play, and now I think we have a pretty good sense of what it is and all the different ways that that can show up in childhood and childhood play. And I want to kind of focus on, why is this so important? So we know what it is, but why is it important for childhood and childhood development and being a part of children's play to have these risky elements? And so I've pulled out some pieces of the research literature to highlight some of these areas. And these aren't the only areas that are the benefits of risky play, but these are just the ones that I've chosen to talk about today. So I'm going to go into depth for each of these, but just to list them all out, we have mental health, motor skills, social behavior, risk perception and competence, physical activity, independence, self-determination, and conflict resolution. So the first benefit I want to focus on is this physical activity. Most of the photos that I have in the presentation today are actually from Wonderbloom, and I do have permission to use these children's photos publicly. The study I want to highlight for physical activity is that there was this randomized trial of 5 to 7-year-olds. They gave them loose parts for 13 weeks. Now, if you're not familiar with loose parts, I think most of us probably are, but if you're not, loose parts are things that are open-ended play materials that could be created into a multitude of things, and you can use your imagination in how these materials are played with. There's not just one form and function for how these materials are used. And so for 13 weeks, these 5 to 7-year-olds were given loose parts to play with. And then the parents were also provided with some parenting education about risky play. And in this photo that I've showed up here, some of the loose parts in this photo are tires and concrete blocks and long sticks. So what they found from this study is that their physical activity increased quite a bit, and not just in the short term. They went back and looked at these children 2 years later and compared with their peers that weren't in that trial. They still had that increased physical activity in their play, which is quite remarkable. Now, I don't want us to forget our elements of risky play. And so I've included a couple more photos up here. I'll describe what they are, and then I want you to shout out of these 6 elements, which elements that you see in the play that the children are using here. So in the photo on the left, these children took these triangular concrete blocks. They moved them around to build a maze. In the second photo, we have a child jumping off of our playground structure. And in the third photo, we have a big compost pile that the children are climbing up. So shout out, which elements of risky play do you see included in these photos? We have height for sure. We do have a fireman's pole that he could have slid down, but he chose to launch himself off. And there's also height climbing up the compost pile too. Anything else? Dangerous tools. Where do you see the dangerous tools? Exactly. These are big, hardy concrete blocks, right? And so those could be dangerous if not used in the right way. Yeah, she sees the wheelbarrow. And would you say that's a speed element maybe? Yeah, if you get in it, right around. Thank you. All right. The second benefit is independence. And I didn't catch your name, but you were talking about this fort and getting away from the adults. What's your name? Emily. Independence was the first thing that came to my mind when she was talking about that. So with independence, this study I wanted to highlight looked at 2 groups of families with 5-year-olds. And with group A, these children weren't allowed to leave their homes unattended. And that was often because of dangerous things, such as they lived in an apartment building next to a busy road. So in that case, it's not safe for them to just wander outside the house. And in group B, the children were allowed to leave the house and play unattended. And so in group B, this group that could leave the house, these children had increased independence, as you can imagine. And in group A, I just thought it was kind of interesting to note, I pulled this out of the study, that there was more strain on the parents in group A since their children couldn't leave and play unattended, and they always had to be supervising them. So you can imagine that that play world was kind of wrapped up in what the adults were able to do for their children. It's not time to leave the house right now. I have these other things to do. And then it's increasing the stress because the children don't have that freedom to. So 2 more photos from Wonderbloom. This one on the left is a giant raspberry patch that there's a community garden close by the school that we're allowed to go wander and explore in. And so there's this tiny path right through the middle that adults didn't even know was there until the children came along and they found that there is this path in the middle of these two lines of raspberry bushes. And then on the right, we have children smashing pumpkins with hammers. So tell me, what elements of risky play do you see in these photos? Dangerous tools for sure with the hammers. They do have their goggles on. Disappearing and getting lost. Yeah, for that. And yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of bees and wasps that visit the flowers of these raspberry bushes. So that's another dangerous element that could be there. The fascinating thing about children is that it's not that they feel the sense of disappearing and getting lost without literally disappearing or getting lost. Like adults can still have eyes on them and they get all the benefits of feeling that way because it feels like they're kind of hidden and out of sight. I wanted to play this short YouTube video about risky play and specifically using hammers.
Yes, it's very easy to bang your thumb when you first start off. Would you like me to start it off for you? And then you don't need to keep your thumb there. Oh, you may have done it, Rose, actually. Done a good job.
Harriet initially shows and models for Rose how to use a large hammer. Large tools might be considered risky, but toy ones that don't work properly can be just frustrating. Later on, as we've seen, Rose struggles on until she succeeds at such a difficult task. Children need to learn how to manage risk.
Oh, that looks very...
Hi, I'm Zoe Gong. As a traditional Chinese medicine chef and food therapist, I love using Squarespace.
With teaching children how to use these tools and use them safely, suddenly there's a lot of independence that has now come with that ability. And the adults trusting them to use those dangerous tools also increases their independence and their independent play. All right, the next benefit, conflict resolution. So I pulled out a rough and tumble play with 11-year-olds. And 11-year-olds were given opportunities to safely do rough and tumble play with each other. And they watched how they navigated these social situations. And it predicted that these children had positive interpersonal cognitive problem-solving skills. And it wasn't the adults monitoring all of this. So often it's the children that come up with these rules and monitor themselves when they're in this kind of play with each other, because they're motivated to want to play with their friend and they want to do it in this way, which is wrestling or whatever. And so in order to continue that play, they have to keep navigating how everyone's doing and feeling in the group while they do that. And they were able to, for the most part, kind of self-navigate all of that. And then they're building up these positive interpersonal skills, and then they can apply that to many areas of their life now. So for rough and tumble play, I grabbed these two photos. This one on the right looks like a child attacking a teacher, but it was a consensual wrestling. And the teacher invited the child to come wrestle. He noticed he had lots of extra energy and he said, "Hey, you want to come wrestle? Here's where we're going to do it. on this rug. And I should have taken a video of it because it's so great how he like so gently lifts the kid up and over and back down so that just very carefully making sure he's not getting injured at all. And really a great time to get out all that angst and energy. And then this other picture on the left is the children were rolling this really giant snowball. And they were using their whole body to kind of get in and around and over each other in order to build up this giant snowball. Do you see any elements of risky play of the 6 elements in these 2 photos? Yeah, dangerous element with the snow and ice, and even it being that big, right? Could be considered a dangerous tool, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, thank you. All right, social behavior is the next benefit of risky play in children. And so all in an elementary school playground, this is loose parts again. It's interesting how a lot of these risky play studies deal with loose parts. Maybe because there's not a regimented way for them to be used or not used. And they realized after 11 weeks of allowing these elementary school students to have loose parts and play with loose parts, that it promoted social interactions between them. And it also increased the teacher's perception of duty of care, which, as you know, we work with children, we work with educators. I think this is important to pull this piece out of the study, which is that if there are elements that have some risk associated with them, as caregivers, we have an increased duty of care in that environment. But on the flip side, there was a lack of injuries. So the teachers felt like they had to like be a little more dutiful about paying attention to what was going on. But it's because they thought there were injuries that were going to happen, but really there weren't the injuries that happened that they thought were going to. And maybe that's a chicken and egg thing. Since they were being vigilant, there were less injuries. Could go both ways. So in these 2 photos, we have, in the left one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 preschoolers that are all working together to pick up a giant log, something that they couldn't do on their own. Could they have gone to a teacher maybe and said like, hey, I need help moving this? They could have, but they decided to figure that out together as a social group. And then in the photo on the right, so one thing that we do at Wonderbloom is for the families that celebrate Christmas, we ask them to drop off their Christmas trees to us after the season instead of recycling them or sending them in the garbage. And we add them to our playground, to our outdoor classroom, and let the kids use those as loose parts. I mean, it's really giant, but it's still a loose part. And so these children navigated that by building these dens. They had been learning about hibernation, so they built these dens with the trees, and it's their little hideout in there. So what elements of risky play do you see in these photos? Getting lost, disappearing, or getting lost. Yep, with the tree, with their den. Anything else? Say that again. Where do you see dangerous tools? With the log. Yeah, I would definitely count that as a dangerous tool too, or a dangerous element, because it is so heavy. So it has that opportunity to be a hazard to the children. In considering social behavior and risky play, you know, we've all been living in this time of going through COVID. Now we're post-COVID. And I've observed some interesting things in the preschoolers that are coming around now. And it's definitely that their social behaviors and their social competence has diminished quite a bit. And they're coming to us with a little less self-regulation, a little more willing to use things like aggression to get what they need rather than using the proper tools of talking it out or getting an adult help. What have you all noticed in the centers that you're working with as far as social skills with the groups that have gone through COVID? Go ahead, Katrina.
Told me about she was teaching this child and she said you have to do this first before you, and he started crying and okay, well, I'm going to help you do this thing first. Always look at
Yeah.
she's noticed that she
Mhm.
the default setting. I'm going to have a big emotion to deal with.
Yeah, and just to repeat a little bit for the people on Zoom. So Katrina talked about a child who the teacher was modeling, you have to do this first to then do this. And the child started crying. And she said, well, you still have to do this to then do this. And the child said, but I'm crying. And so Katrina was making the point that, you know, a lot of family, not every family, but a lot of families experience limited social interactions for a couple of years during COVID. And so they didn't quite have the same reach and breadth of those experiences. And, you know, bless us for those centers that stayed open to help during this transition, and bless all the parents that kept their kids at home during that time too. And I really do feel confident that the children will recover or kind of catch up in these social skills. But it has been an interesting shift to see that I feel like, you know, the 3-year-olds that are coming in were acting more like 2-year-olds, and the 4-year-olds are acting more like 3-year-olds. And it was kind of this domino effect. There's a lot of nodding heads in this room. So I think we've seen this. All right, mental health is the next benefit of risky play. And in this study, they looked at these groups. So gray cities is the term they were using in the study to mean like very urban places without a lot of greenery, a lot of buildings, a lot of concrete, a lot of sidewalks. And obviously these children had less outdoor playtime and less risky playtime in these kind of urban settings. And the parents were more worried about safety, which makes sense. And so they limited their children's activities. And just as a couple notes in addition to this, the current generation of children has 5 to 8 times more anxiety and depression than the previous generations. And when we promote this kind of risky play for the sake of mental health, then we see these benefits such as being able to make decisions, exert self-control, regulate emotions, and experience joy. Peter Gray wrote an article about the decline of play and the rise of psychopathology. And so he listed 5 functions of play. And he said, first of all, it's to develop intrinsic interests and competencies, to learn how to make decisions, solve problems, and exert self-control and follow rules. The third one is to learn to regulate their own emotions. The fourth is to make friends and get along with other people. And the last one, like I mentioned, is to experience joy. And so with all of these things, they are improving or increasing their mental health. As a mental health example, at Wonderbloom, we have a canal close by our school, so we take walking field trips with the children there. So great to be walking out in nature. They got to watch a family of baby ducklings grow up over the summer. They would visit once or twice a week, see these baby ducklings grow. And we'll often do mindfulness journaling while we're out there too. So we kind of give them some prompts, but often at this age, they're just kind of drawing or scribbling whatever they want to. But we're building this foundation of paying attention to themselves, how they're feeling, the world around them. And so what elements of risky play do you see in this photo? Yes, the water. So before we even took children out here, we walked out there as adults and looked for all the hazards and risks and had those on the forefront of our mind so that we could develop a set of rules for the children before venturing out on this field trip. And when you do that, there's always a moment of like, will the children listen? Will they pay attention? Will they follow the directions? And with the proper preparation, they have done amazing. I mean, we even have like protocols set in place of like, if a child falls in the water, here's what we do, this and this and this, you know. Haven't had to deal with that yet, fortunately. The next benefit is risk perception and competence. So 3 to 8 year olds, this is the group that most of us work with. At their school child care facility, they had 3 months of risky play intervention, which means they were giving them these same elements we've been talking about, some of these big loose parts. And each time that they introduced this play or these parts to the children, they noticed an increased perception and competence in the children, and they responded faster to the risks at hand. And so that shows that with experience, children can get better at this and more competent. Here's a couple of our risky. Oh, so this photo is, we're about to start a real fire here. But before we got to that point, the children had been pretend playing with fire. And there was this whole curriculum that we had developed teaching them what fire is, what it's used for, why is it dangerous, how do we stay safe? And then after all of that, then we finally introduced the actual flames of the fire, and it was very exciting for them. And then another dangerous tools with these wood mallets by hammering out some plants and leaves. So this all gets me thinking about, are we risky by nature? Are humans naturally risky? Do we want to take risks? Is it built into us, into our DNA? And so I'm just monitoring the time here a little bit, but I'm going to skip one of the videos I was going to do and just tell you about this. So Karen Adolph is a researcher who has studied infant and toddler locomotion, so how they move their bodies in space. And she does these really cool experiments where she'll have a baby crawl onto kind of on a flat platform that goes to a drop off. Doesn't drop off very far, and there's always someone there ready to catch the infant. And very new crawlers crawl right off of it, without a care in the world. It's like they don't know what the risk is, they don't know what the hazard is, they crawl right off of it. But more experienced crawlers suddenly get to the edge, look down, start looking around for help, maybe turn their bodies around so they can go off feet first, and they start adapting. So this shows me that, or at least Karen Adolph surmised that we aren't really built with risk inherently in us. And it's through these experiences and through our interactions with other people in the environment that help us learn what's going to be safe or not safe. And so that goes to this prior experience too. And so some of the fears we have around risk both in children and as adults who are helping children manage risk, is children maybe have a lack of maturity to deal with whatever risky scenario that's put in front of him. And allowing them to have risks in play, which is monitored by an adult and set up, and the adult's ready to intervene if something goes wrong. Children can have those safe experiences and develop that maturity. And then also our brains are growing and developing too. And every time we have experiences with something risky, our brain is going to log those, and then it's going to recall that information later on. Our personality and temperament also goes into this. So raise your hand if you like would go skydiving right now. If I was like, here's your ticket, raise your hand if you're like that person. You would just go jump out of a plane. Now raise your hand if you're like, that sounds like my worst nightmare and I would never get close to that. So we have a few people that are on that end of like, yeah, let's do it. And then some people who are like, no, thank you. I'm definitely more on that end. And like, I don't like to downhill ski. I'll cross country ski because flat, no hills. But because that's my own personal feeling of the risk I'm willing to take. And so research actually plays this out that like our personality and our temperament goes into how much risk we're willing to engage in. And then that is going to transfer now to the children that we're working with or caring for. Because if you're one of those people that's like, oh no, you can't do that, don't touch that, no. And you're only ever thinking about all the things that could go wrong, that's going to keep the children that you're working with from experiencing some of those things too. And so this brings us to the next really important point, because you're starting to think like, Sarah, why are you giving all of these children all of these dangerous things to do? We have childcare licensing to worry about. We have incident reports. We have parents who are going to be mad at us. And mostly we're just here to keep children safe. And so that's where we start weighing risks versus hazards. So risks are not inherently bad. I could find a piece of cheesecake at the back of my fridge. I don't know how long it's been there. Is that a risk I'm willing to take because I really want to eat that cheesecake? It could turn out really great because now my belly's full of yummy cheesecake, or I could get sick from it. And so risks are kind of this thing that could go either way. And it's really just a challenge and an uncertainty we have in the environment. But hazards are something that actually will cause physical harm if come in contact with sharp, rusty nails, for example. When we think about risks and hazards in a childcare setting, we want to think that the hazards can be managed by an adult. I can remove all the rusty nails so that the children aren't aware of, so that they don't accidentally step on them or sit on them. But the risks actually should be more managed by the child, because it's how they feel about how they're interacting with the environment. Look at this picture. This is a playground from the early 1900s, which is when playgrounds were invented. And they were invented in urban settings for children to have a safe place where they weren't going to be run over by horses and wagons. This is a metal pole with metal chains hanging down from it that the children are swinging from. Do we see any problem with this? Obviously, we see some hazards here. The metal chains could whip somebody pretty hard. They could get wrapped around someone. If it's a hot day, they could burn somebody. And so it is important to not throw all of this out the window and say, we just need children to engage in risky play all the time because it's so good for them, but to say, how can we do this in a safe way? So these authors, Kaplan and Garrick, came up with this formula, which is risks equals hazards divided by or tampered down by safeguards. And so the safeguards are really our responsibility as adults to be paying attention to what the hazards are in the environment and removing or limiting access to those hazards. And that in itself is going to lower the risk in the situation. But we don't want to remove the risk entirely because, like we've just been talking about for almost an hour, risk has so much benefit to child development. So,
I have a question on this.
yes, of course.
So what I've noticed is that our schools, the
Mhm.
schools do not have any swings because of the.
Right.
Have those.
I will answer this. Swings are so important for proprioceptive and kinesthetic development of a child. As someone who runs their own school right now, when we moved in, there were swings and we took them out. And the reason why is because we have such a large area for the children to run and play. And 3 to 5 year olds don't have a great sense of their own body and space. And so a lot of injuries happen just because they don't have this sense of staying out of the way if someone's on the swing. And we didn't have enough adults that were there to provide that safeguard and be helping those children do that safely. So I think it is super important. And I encourage the parents at our school to go to playgrounds and swing on swings or hang one in their own yard, in their own tree, because I think it is so important. But that's one of the things, and this is why it is up to the adults creating this environment to decide, like, what are the risks and hazards that I'm comfortable with that I can mitigate, and what are the ones that I don't feel like I can. Go ahead, Katrina.
I was exploring this, we have a very narrow space,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't have the next. Swings on the phone around
Mm-hmm.
at Kaplan the other day, they have a
Mm.
maybe as tall as this table. And so it allows kids to experiment with that sensation,
Mm-hmm.
emotion. But just looking at it, like this requires a very small ball zone
Yes.
for children who are like, I'm not getting on that giant set, like safe way to.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe
Yes. That's great. I didn't know about that. Is there anything else you want to add about swings? Yeah.
I mean, I can understand at the preschool level, but I mean, I was in elementary school.
Yeah.
And I mean, the school can still have swings in our school district. Schools that already had swings and keep their swings, just to know.
Mm-hmm.
Swings.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Of injuries. Yeah. And at a school age level, I know. Well, and that's kind of the lovely thing about playground safety is that we don't have those giant chains hanging from poles like they did in the 1900s. But then it ends up kind of getting a little too far away from the fun and excitement and risk of play and the enjoyment of it, right? So this term I came up with is we need to help children develop an internal riskometer. How are they feeling about the risks that they're taking? And how are they going to navigate those? And as adults, we can help them through this process. So this graphic is actually from a publication from Boston University. And they said, instead of be careful, try these phrases. And so if you want to help the child foster awareness of what's around them, then you can say things like, notice how these rocks are slippery, or the log is rotten, or is that branch very strong? Or do you see that poison ivy? Do you see your friends? Try moving your feet really slowly, quickly, strongly. Try using your hands, arms, legs, elbows, head in a certain way. Do you feel stable in that rock? Do you feel the heat from that fire? And then are you feeling scared, excited, tired, safe? And like I said, as adults, we might be feeling a little anxious if we have a fire in front of a group of preschool children. And it's okay to express that to the children too, like, I'm feeling a little nervous and afraid about this fire because if any of you come too close, you could get burnt. So what do you think our rules around this should be to help us stay safe? And then you can also help the child problem solve. So you can say, what's your plan? So if you cross over onto that boulder, where are you going next? What's your plan from there? If you climb up way high in that tree, what's your plan to get down? What could you use? So like having them use tools around them. Where will you? So where are you going to put that rock? Where's that stick going? If we see a child running with a giant 6-foot long stick through our outdoor classroom, we have to be like, whoa, what's your plan? Where are you taking it? What do you plan to do with it? Because otherwise that could become a javelin real quick. How will you get down? How will you get up? How will you go around this? And who's going to be helping you? Who's going to be participating in this? Who's going to be with you when you do that? So this is all to develop that internal sense of what the child's comfortable with, what they're not quite comfortable with, and you're just pointing those things out along the way. So to leave a few minutes for question and answer, I just wanted to review the things we've talked about. We talked about the 6 types of risky play, or what the 6 elements, what constitutes risky play. Risky play is all about enjoying the thrills, and we can do that in a safe way by weighing the risks and the hazards. There are so many benefits for risky play, and so many of them are transformational for the children, especially because of what I was telling you at the beginning, which is children spending so much time on screens, they're not having that hands-on access to their environment. We know that brain development and our experiences and our temperament and personality shape how we feel about risk and how we engage in risk. And then we can help develop this internal riskometer in the children that we work with too. So I would love to take any questions that we have. Yes.
I am trying to.
Mhm.
Let's see, there's. They're like, oh my, give him home with a bruise, somebody's bullying him. So we want education on what actually is bullying. But then introducing. Allowing kids to do something a little bit risky. I myself, like I sit in the kitchen. I guess I'm playing. Like, I was. I can't, do I watch it? No, I don't want. But my question really is like. What to say for that?
Right. Yeah. So Katrina's question was about helping parents understand that risky play is an important part of childhood play, and how to help them kind of come to terms with understanding their own comfort level with that. So I don't have like one resource for you, but I like to cite research. So I'm going to tell you that there's a research study done out of the University of Arizona, and I'm blanking on the last name, but his first name's John. And he specifically tackled this because he's in Arizona, which is mostly desert, which people perceive as super unsafe just for the fact that it is what it is. It's got cactuses and stingy scorpions and scary snakes, and it's hot. And so his aim was to educate parents about how to safely engage in this risky play, which just meant going outside in Arizona, and how to feel comfortable with that. And so at the end of his study, I just remember his last name, Bello, Bello. And so at the end of his study, he realized that for the parents that were receiving this information, and he did it through really simple like infographics, and he had a social media account and things like that. For the parents that were receiving this information, their perceptions about the risk of playing outside in Arizona changed. And parents started realizing that, there are these hazards, like the sun and the heat is a hazard. And so how do we mitigate that so that we can still be spending time outside? And he saw an increase in the amount of time that the children and families were spending outside, and then also their perception of how risky it was. So I don't have like a book or something or an article to send you, but just knowing that we can educate and know that the parents will come along with us.
Here's a question from online. Is
Mhm.
there a type of risky play that is more beneficial than hiking? Or are they all beneficial?
I would say that they are definitely all beneficial. The easiest ones to do in a preschool setting is to put out these loose parts, all big and small and everything in between, and then let them create from those so that they have that ability to disappear and use the tools and work together to develop that social competence and all of that.
List of the these parts, like are there parts that seem to work better than others, or
We have this loose parts book at our school. I think it's published by NAUIC. Don't quote me on that, but look for that and see if it exists. But there are books out there that talk all about loose parts and how to use them. Yes.
One thing I want to say is, looking at where I'm coming from. See, here, comes to guidance is there, but then the kids don't get to this. I think like we should just try to guide the kids in this part.
Yeah, so for those of you on Zoom, that comment is by Abdul, who's a teacher at Wonderbloom, and he grew up in Ghana. And he said that he had lots of chances to go exploring and climbing trees and experiencing some of these risky play, but he didn't feel like there was any adult guidance. And he is suggesting that with this adult guidance, the children can learn a lot more. Did I get that right? Okay. Yes.
I also grew up in a desert and bushes everywhere.
Mhm.
And it was an amazing experience. I loved it because my mom would be like, so you go outside and play and be like, and bars on a wire. And
Oh my
we would
gosh.
do nothing all day. And we go in and like play forts, and my brother made a tree house and go play in his tree. We were able to weigh our risks, and also I agree with that.
So for those of you on Zoom, she was retelling a story about growing up in the desert and feeling like she could really just immerse herself and explore and just play all day with her siblings and make makeshift zip lines. And it kept her entertained.
But yeah, we would just like think from it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. How much more time can we take?
1 minute.
Okay, one more minute.
About
Yeah.
risky play and adult supervision.
Mhm.
How much do you supervise in this risky play? Let children go out at home instead of at preschool. Would you like go and be here? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, the question is about how much adult supervision do you provide during risky play? And so, Abdul, do you want to answer this?
I would say is. Let's get a chance to follow the game. I mean, like, you just.
Yeah, so Abdul mentioned that it's probably best to have it be child-led, but you are definitely supervising. Like a lot of these photos that I showed you with like going next to the canal, building a fire, having tires and concrete blocks, like we are constantly talking to the children about the safe play with those elements. And if a child's not being safe, then we might have to remove them for a time and say, let's practice again how to be safe with these. Because those things can get thrown and dropped on kids. And it's rare, but it can happen. And so it's important to be there to catch those moments, right? Especially like at Wonderbloom, we try to accept children who at differing levels of abilities. And so you might have children that might not have the social maturity or social competence to understand that this brick would hurt somebody if I dropped it on them. And so taking into consideration that different children might also need different levels of supervision too. But yeah, I think preparing the children for the rules in advance is super important. And even having them come up with some rules is sometimes really fun because then they feel empowered and independent about it. All right, I think our time is up, but thank you so much, everybody, for participating in the risky play.